How could it be that one of my favorite gadgets of 2024 runs last year's chip, last year's OS, and has cameras that in the grand scheme of things are just pretty average? The device I'm talking about is also one of the most expensive smartphones you can buy that isn't some kind of diamond-clad aftermarket monstrosity. And it's not just impressive because of its price, around double what you'd usually fork out for a high-end folding phone. One of the reasons I love it is because this foldable is practically indistinguishable from a regular flat phone most of the time. This is the Honor Magic V2 RSR, built in collaboration with Porsche Design, the RSR name coming from the racing versions of Porsche's vehicles that aren't, strictly speaking, street legal. Now, this phone won't land you in any legal jeopardy if you're spotted with it out in the wild.
Stop right there, criminal scum!
But you get the idea. This is a special, exclusive, turbocharged version of the standard Magic V2, the opposite of a mass-market product. The design and hardware is key to what makes this thing so special. In its folded configuration, it's about the same size and heft as your regular old smartphone. In fact, if we're talking one-handed use, I actually find it quite a bit easier to handle this foldable folded shut than I do my iPhone 15 Pro Max. And that's the key hardware choice that dictates everything else about this device, both the good and the bad. But we'll save the nasty surprises for a bit later though, and first get into the nuts and bolts of why this might be my favorite foldable ever. At 9.9mm folded, the Magic V2 RSR is only about a millimeter thicker than a typical flagship, and fully deployed in tablet mode it measures just 4.7mm. That's ludicrously thin, even beating the still excellent OnePlus Open. Same deal in terms of weight. At 234 grams, it's within a single gram of the S24 Ultra. It manages to hit that aggressive target weight in part by using a polyurethane back panel that's plastic to you and me instead of the usual glass. And I think I'm fine with that. It has a pleasant matte finish that strikes a nice balance between hand feel and grip, accentuating the central flyline here that mirrors the look of the Porsche 911. And that's punctuated by an equally aggressive camera protrusion framed in titanium. If all you've known of foldables has been Samsung's Z Fold series, then this hardware will feel like a generational leap forward, delivering more of the tablet-style hardware benefits with fewer compromises. Now, I definitely don't hate the Z Fold, but after using the Magic, it's hard to ignore Samsung's more cramped outer screen, thicker proportions, and chunkier sidewalls. There's no fooling your brain into thinking you're just using a regular mid-sized smartphone. The Magic's svelte form factor is enabled by a lighter titanium hinge tucked away under the unassuming plastic spine along the left edge. Again, look at this next to the iPhone's sidewalls for an idea of just how small they've managed to make this. The phone opens smoothly without any crunching noises that you might have noticed in older foldables, with just the right amount of resistance, and closes with a reassuring snap. The hinge is also stiff enough to use it half open, for example playing video back on the cover screen, though ever so slightly looser than the hinge of the Samsung Fold when used in this mode. Elsewhere, the rounded aluminium frame makes for comfortable use whether it's folded or opened out. That's one of the things that makes one-handing the Magic V2 quite a bit easier than slab phones like the 15 Pro Max. And like any respectable foldable, there's also a fast in-button fingerprint scanner built into the power key over on the right here. Now sure, this runs the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 SoC, and admittedly that is a generation removed from the cutting edge, but it's still a fantastic chip, and there aren't any foldables with Gen 3 available in the West at the time we're making this video anyway. For anything besides the heaviest gaming and benchmarking duties, you likely won't notice any difference between Gen 2 and Gen 3. And this being possibly the most premium phone available, you'll enjoy a maxed out loadout of RAM and storage too, 16 gigs plus 1TB. Both displays, 6.4-inch outside and 7.9-inch inside, are gorgeous, running up to 120Hz, and the RSR version, unlike the regular Magic V2, has the benefit of Honor's Rhino Power nanocrystal glass. Yes, that really is the name, I'm not making that up. This glass is also used in the Magic 6 Pro, Honor's current flat flagship, and I saw some impressive demos of its scratch-resistant capabilities at the company's MWC booth in Barcelona recently. For what it's worth, my cover screen is still looking pristine after around 3 months. The internal screen obviously is still basically plastic, and so more smudge prone than the other one, but the level of brightness here nevertheless allows for easy daylight viewing. The display borders of both panels are kept to a respectable level too, not quite iPhone slim, but uniform and far from being a distraction. The form factor of both, of course, gives you the perfect canvas size to run 2 apps comfortably on the inner screen, or handle full desktop web pages or photo galleries. You can throw this phone in your pocket when you're out for a run, then open it up on the couch in the evening for an expansive tablet experience, and neither of these modes of operation feels unnatural or compromised. Again, the cramped feeling that you sometimes get from the Z Fold 5's outer panel just isn't a thing here. Finally, running with the spec sheet, there's a battery which on paper beats out most foldables, especially Samsung's, with a 5000 mAh cell, backed up by surprisingly speedy 66-watt wired charging. That charger is actually provided in the box, unlike a lot of other phones these days. In fact, there are two provided, both European and UK spec, in the box. Also bundled is the Honor Pen, a larger Bluetooth stylus usable with either internal or external displays. There's no place to dock it or attach it to the phone in any way, so instead there's a tasteful leather carry case also bundled in the box to make it a bit less losable. Speaking of leather cases, the box includes one for the phone as well, providing some coverage for the all-important hinge, back panel and camera cluster, together with a rather fetching stitched pattern around the back. I'm normally not a big case guy, but if you're spending close to $3,000 and the case comes in the box, then yeah, maybe you want to think about using it. It doesn't add that much heft either, considering how slim this phone already is. Physical space for cameras is always at a premium in foldables, much more so than a regular flat phone. And so, having used the Fold 5 recently, I went into my time with the Magic V2 RSR with pretty modest photographic expectations. Nevertheless, with 50 megapixel wide and ultra-wide shooters paired with bright f/1.9 and f/2 lenses respectively, in addition to a 2.5 times telephoto, the Magic V2 RSR always managed to produce pleasing photos and was unfazed by everyday occurrences like heavy backlighting and low light scenarios. Honor's AI tuning modes can help colors to pop, or alternatively add a level of saturation to your pictures that you might not want, but at least if you prefer not to use this, it's easy to turn off. There's not a whole lot to say about this device's cameras really, besides the fact that they are perfectly fine across the board. All three are a tier below your Pixel 8 Pro or Xiaomi 14 Ultra. You can definitely buy a lot better mobile camera for this phone's asking price, but for most of what you need most of the time, you'll find this is a fine trio of shooters. Pictures are punchy, but it's easy to dial back that saturation by disabling the AI processing modes if you want. And the telephoto, although it does struggle at around 10 times or above from that 20 megapixel sensor with native 2.5 times zoom, is perfectly decent at up to around 5 times even in darker conditions. One major feature you're missing is Ultra HDR photography, something you'll find in the iPhone and many 2024 Android flagships. The Magic V2 can shoot and play back Ultra HDR video, but still photography is limited to SDR. Not a deal breaker there, but worth noting. Being a foldable, of course, you also get some nice to have extras like front screen preview when shooting photos of others, and you can also use the rear-facing camera to take selfies, though bafflingly the palm recognition and timer-based features that work so well on the Samsung foldables haven't been recreated over on Honor's foldable. The timer is hidden behind layers of menus, and the hands-free shortcut is actually smile recognition, which I found to be hit or miss without making a terrifyingly unnatural Cheshire Cat smile. The best workaround I found was to use a floating shutter key and sort of contort my index finger into tapping on the corner of the display. Pretty awkward. If you sense that we might be segueing towards the negative aspects of this phone, then you're right. And you might have also guessed that we're also going to pivot a bit more towards software, because this is one area where Honor still struggles with its flavor of Android that still has a feel for where Huawei was 4 or 5 years ago. My biggest beef with Honor's macOS 7.2 here isn't necessarily that it's still running Android 13 as opposed to the newer Android 14 based version 8 that powers the Magic 6 Pro. What bugs me is that much of Honor's software throws out the great foldable features that have been part of stock Android for almost 2 years at this point. First and foremost, the taskbar, which has been retired in favor of a slower gesture-based multitasking system. Now sure, this keeps more of the screen free for your apps, but it's also more convoluted to use, with various swipes and gestures from various areas employed to split the screen, move around apps, or switch them between full screen, split screen, and windowed modes. If you've used a Z Fold or Pixel Fold, you'll know how it's so much easier to just have a persistent shortcut bar of apps down below for quickly hopping between your tasks. Honor forces you to swipe inwards and hold to bring up its equivalent, this multitasking bar here, and while in theory you might think this would work similarly, it's not there all the time, and so the extra swiping just serves to slow everything down. Add to that aggressive background app management, persistent nags about battery use or apps not being designed for foldables, and it's more of a frustrating experience than it needs to be. It often feels like the gorgeous hardware that Honor and Porsche Design have created is being let down by Fisher price tier software. And on the other hand, as good as that hardware is, the fact that Honor has leaned so far into going thin and light, a noble goal in a foldable, nonetheless means that some hardware features need to fall by the wayside as well. There's no wireless charging and no IP rating for water and dust resistance, both of which the chunkier Samsung foldables do offer. And Samsung also somewhat outperforms the Magic V2 on battery life, especially with its battery efficient performance profile enabled. It also remains to be seen how generous Honor will be when it comes to repairs over the years. Being a foldable, this is more liable to break from day-to-day wear, especially around that hinge and the internal display. Samsung has a solid track record, Honor is largely untested. Meanwhile, the adoption of Porsche's design language has produced a very masculine, very monochrome product that won't appeal to everyone at the expense of this phone's ability to lay flat on a table without wobbling around. And yet, as much as I shouldn't love this silly, overpriced phone running last year's chip and last year's version of Android, it is one of my favorites of 2024. Once I was able to get to grips with Honor's slightly clunky approach to software and multitasking, the fact that it runs Android 13 didn't really make much difference to me. The size and form factor delivers on the promise of what a foldable phone could be in a way that isn't quite matched by any device I've previously used. And the RSR version gets you a lighter, more durable foldable with maxed out specs and many nice to have extras. Look, I'm 100% not saying you should spend $3,000 on this thing. The regular Honor Magic V2 is 95% of this phone for around 50% of the price. Go buy that one, because most of the good things about the RSR also apply to the street legal version of this phone. Nevertheless, I'm glad that ridiculous, interesting, over-engineered phones like this exist, and the halo effect of the RSR just goes to show that Samsung really can't afford to coast in its 2024 foldables. That's it for now. Let me know what you think of this ridiculous piece of hardware down in the comments. Stick around for more foldable coverage and comparisons coming soon. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.